JD kindly introduced me. My name is Phoebe. I do all of this kind of stuff, probably a bit more, sometimes can't fit it all on, but these are the main kind of things I do. But I'm not talking about that today. Today's lecture I've actually adapted from a university lecture that I often give. I've edited it slightly for this class because, you know, different students, different information, but it's a lot of it's really relevant to you. And this lecture was basically created by a time when I was actually asked 10 specific questions from an academic lecturer for uni students, and they're great questions and they just seem to fit with a lot of the speaking I do. So, and I'm going to apologise because I'm going to be reading a lot today because there's just life and work circumstances where I don't always get to memorise everything ad verbatim every time. Yes, life gets a bit busy and messy, so I'm going to be reading but still trying to be really engaging with you. Now, I officially took unwell and was hospitalised over a decade ago and was eventually diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder in 2008. There followed a few years of denial, confusion, uncertainty, acceptance of the dominant framework of understanding and the disease model, lack of insight, not that I really like that term anymore, some basic education, loss of hope, self-discovery, meaning-making, and that came after I had some really meaty education, learning about consumer involvement in academia and who our consumer academics are here and overseas and what they say, and having access to a lot of medical journals on a specific course I was on. So I really made a lot of decisions and meaning-making after that experience. I went on to be a better self-advocate, advocate for myself, self-empowerment, self-actualisation, and then eventually self-mastery, which is, I think, where we really want to get, and I don't think our services really offer that. A lot of the terms that I think connect with personal recovery, at least for me, are not terms I see written anywhere in policy or care plans. So I think we have a way to go with what we aim for, you know. So first question that I get asked, what does personal recovery mean to me? So I'm just going to start with a few basics, and this is just about 3 minutes sort of intro to this. I'm just going to summarise the 3 types of recovery. I'm sure you've all learnt that: clinical, social and personal. And it's important for me to sort of just preamble that, I guess, because it was after all those understandings that then I figured out what it was that I did and what personal recovery means to me. So, clinical, social, personal. Clinical recovery has probably never been more under fire than now. The biomedical model, in which we medicalise people's problems and pathologise their personal experiences, label with a psychiatric diagnosis and aim for symptom eradication with medication, clearly is not working for many. So this kind of recovery will rarely work in isolation. Biological psychiatry is under serious questioning. It is the only area of medicine that has no evidence base. We have a lot of evidence-based treatments and a lot of evidence-based professions, things like CBT, DBT. There's a lot of evidence in a lot of the things that we do. But biological psychiatry as a whole is viewed now by many as a social construct. It is one offering of one understanding, and you can accept it or reject it. When one has a basic understanding of disease classification, how that works, and diagnosis, and how that works across the medical field, it is then clear that it is applied unscientifically or totally ignored in the area of psychiatry and psychiatric diagnosis. Mental illness, on lots of levels and lots of different types of things we label as disorders, don't actually hold up scientifically. A perfect example is schizophrenia, classified in our DSM as organic brain disease. According to science, this has a construct validity rating of 0. It has a descriptive validity rating of 0. it has a predictive validity rating of 0, it has a reliability rating of 0, and it has an interrelated reliability rating of 0. This is not my opinion, this is just a global fact. And psychiatry does seem to have legitimised itself on not very much. Now, there are several reasons why those ratings are 0, and that's not for this lecture, that's a whole other lecture that I do. I digressed already, but if anyone gets a chance to read Bentl's paper, 1998, it's a cracking read. Now, usually when I make some of these kind of scientific statements and I propose alternative frameworks and I quote certain things, I do get met with these very uncomfortable faces. And I hear these, it's very, very frightening, especially when I lecture clinicians, because it's so uncomfortable for them, because this type of knowledge and readings and learning and access to the literature that you need to raise awareness is not taught in universities. It's not taught to mental health professionals in universities, and it's not even taught to psychiatrists. It's something you have to self-learn, and you have to know where to look and who to look for. And that was an education I felt privileged to get back in 2016 at the Curtin University's School of OT Social Work and Speech Pathology. They have a Value and Lived Experience project, and within that project they run something called the Lived Experience Educators Unit. And wow, you can get, it was a real journey for many of us. You get access to things that service users typically don't get access to, and it's a real, it was pretty much a minefield, and a lot of us felt very uncomfortable during that course as well. And that's not to say that any choices I've made about how I view my illness is a global truth either. I just made a decision for myself. But when I go out and speak, as an activist and an advocate, I always feel obliged to just present some of these alternative understandings, spout out a few scientific facts like that, just because I think it's not about me wanting to go around and convince everyone what I think is right. It's about that things just need to be heard and acknowledged, especially in the universities, because they're all the next generation of clinicians, and they're so trained into a clinical mindset. So a lot of my lectures do contain some of these kind of radical statements, but I just like to open a dialogue. That's what I want to do, is just open a dialogue, because all these alternative frameworks, they're out there, there's millions of them. So I made personal choice to choose a trauma-only framework. And everyone goes, oh, well, we acknowledge trauma in the medical disease model, but it's not the same thing. And I draw on several other frameworks. There's cultural frameworks, psycho-spiritual frameworks, ones that acknowledge socio-geopolitical context, social injustice, individual psychology, life experience. So there's lots to choose from. And unfortunately, our mental health services don't offer any of them. We here and in a lot of westernised countries are only offering the westernised dominant approach of biological psychiatry in a disease model, where you get a diagnosis and you're effectively socially labelled, well, probably forever, and you're sick, and that's the only view. It's just like, you must be sick because I'm normal and I act in a societally acceptable way and you don't, so I'm normal and you're not, so therefore you must be sick, here's a disorder for you. And that's kind of the way that everyone just accepts that that mental illness is an illness, and this is the model, and this is true, and these are doctors and they studied a long time, I must be sick, my brain's broken, my chemicals are all out of whack. And the chemical imbalance theory is still a theory, it's not been proven anywhere in the world yet. It might be, I don't know, as of at the moment, it's not proven, and I think there are a lot of service users out there going, no, it's not me, no, it's a chemical imbalance. And the British Royal College of Psychiatry actually removed that from the website way back in 2006 because they cannot sustain even having that phrase anywhere near psychiatry. So there are a lot of moves now to say the chemical thing is just not, there's just no evidence. So anyway, I've digressed again. I'm very passionate about raising awareness of all these things because I love it. So we, in respect to the fact that we only have that one approach and we don't offer all these alternatives, then we're not really helping people self-empower. which is a bit sad and frustrating because we say, oh, we deliver person-centred care in Australia, we're all into person-centred care. I don't see how you can possibly deliver person-centred care if people are not empowered or supported to self-empower and raise awareness of other alternatives, choose their own understanding, meaning make their own understanding. Yeah, self-empowerment is about your own meaning making. We don't offer it, so I don't actually think then that we're really offering person-centred care or personal recovery, because it fits into that too. Yeah, so I think our services have got a long way to go. So I'll skip on. Oh, I went too long on that. On social recovery. Now, on the surface, this makes a lot more sense. Social recovery is a little bit more sort of inclusive and flexible and, yeah, a bit more inclusive than just the clinical recovery only. Focusing on a sense of community belonging, active citizenship is definitely a better way to go. But even social recovery has loopholes and shortcomings. I presented a social recovery critique in New York last year at the World Summit of Positive Psychology, Mindfulness and Psychotherapy. And some of my basic points are that social recovery in itself is also potentially disempowering. I can join all the social clubs and groups and go to all the barbecues, I can put myself out there, but is that real? Now, it's lovely if we live in this idyllic, utopian world where everybody accepts each other and we're all inclusive and everyone's understanding. But when I'm trying to make meaningful connections and relationships and have an active citizenship in a society that actively stigmatises me and discriminates against me, it's pretty bloody hard. So I can do my part, but it's not always enough. What we have is a global and a societal issue. So while social recovery is integral, it won't work in isolation, again, by itself. And these are a couple of quotes from a paper that I love, Harper and Speed 2012. The implicit assumptions inherent in dominant recovery, resilience and discourses render them problematic because they individualise what are actually social problems, and the structural causes of distress are obscured. And what they talk about in that paper is the social determinants of health. Housing, employment, somewhere safe to live, not being abused, and all these things that make up actually part of our mental health and often our physical health as well. You know, if I'm living in the caravan at the back of the crack house, right, with no job, and I'm struggling to feed my children, and we're not even safe where we're living either, so we're not safe and we can't eat, then I'm probably going to be anxious, and I'm probably going to be hearing voices. It's not my brain, it's my life circumstances. Stress does all these different things to people, so you can slap a schizophrenia diagnosis on me, but actually what I'm living in probably has a lot more to do with it. And so, my favourite, I love Professor Nancy Fraser, she's also featured in the paper I just mentioned. It's only when the collective structural experiences of inequality and injustice are explicitly linked to processes of emotional distress that recovery will be possible. Love that quote. So this leaves us with the all-important personal recovery. And we all know the famous quote, Anthony 1993. And that seems to be our working definition. Yes, it's a deeply personal and unique journey. From my personal pit of hopelessness and total despair, recovery had to be a process of completely rebuilding myself on every level, and all my friendships and my entire life. That meant meaning-making of my experiences, education about mental health and well-being, so I could make an educated and informed choice, and decisions, a sense of purpose in life, employment, a career even is something I'm passionate about, and 100 other things in between. I only have a few minutes on each question, but there was a key theme that fueled my recovery: identity. So many mental health consumers have sadly lost their identity. Imagine when your whole life becomes appointments, psychiatry appointments, appointments with your care coordinator, your OT, the employment service, your GP and your psychologist, job capacity assessments, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. It is not surprising that people lose their sense of self and lose their identity. And it's very, very sad when we end up in a situation where we only self-identify as a patient. I have problems with a patient again because it's a medical thing, but that's another story. When someone asks you, oh, what do you do? Oh, I don't work, I've been ill for a long time. I'm a psych patient. That's really, really sad because you're probably about 20 things before that. You might be a wife, a mum, an artist, all these things, someone that loves cooking, all these things before that label doesn't need to be mentioned at all. And so, my personal framework is that I prefer the term discovery to recovery. And I sort of postulated that there might be a fourth type of recovery framework, and I'm authoring a book on it at the moment called Re-Identification, the Discovery Framework. And for me, my journey was not so much about returning to a previous health status, and what clinicians call pre-morbid functioning, which I think is a really bad term. Yes, when you've broken your leg, you want it fixed and you want to be able to walk like you did before. That's what you did, that's what you want, and that's what you expect, and usually that's what happens. Doesn't always work that way in mental health. For me, it was about discovering a new me, a new version of me with all the experience and learning that I'd had. I would say that very few of us recover in a sense that we return to exactly who we were before we took unwell. Most of us have learned so much about ourselves through our mental health challenges that we want to move forward as a new package, perhaps even a new and far improved version of ourselves. It is just as probable that life can get even better after an illness or diagnosis than before. I personally see my lived experience as one of the biggest gifts that I've ever had. I learned so much and gained true clarity about myself, my strengths, my worldview, my values, my weaknesses, and I've definitely not returned to my former self. And most of us don't. How could we? And if we could, would we want to? Most of us, that's a no. So I'm postulating this kind of re-identification process. And so, watch out for the book. And after all this re-identification and reinvention, I became Phoebe Kingston version 2.0. and that was a bit bigger then, that was after my baby. So, next question. What do I see myself as recovering from? And I'll preface this with a key point. That on that one level, the diagnosis wasn't relevant. Being labelled with schizoaffective disorder did not help me in the long term. Initially, I guess it did, for a couple of reasons. That I could Google it and go, oh, I'm not the only one, I'm not on my own, oh, there's treatments for that, and I might do quite well looking at some kind of prognosis. In this case, I might do well, but, there are treatments. So in that way, I guess it was helpful. But eventually, I asked myself, am I really, really clinically sick? And I now view psychiatric diagnoses, essentially social labels, very harmful. So how about, I'm just Phoebe, and I lived the life that I lived and faced the trauma and the adversity that I faced. And my mind and my emotions, in an attempt to cope, did all these weird and wacky and very difficult, confusing and frightening things. But perhaps those things are just a natural and normal part of the human experience. And if you look at the statistics and look at your own life and large people around you, well, everyone's had some kind of baggage, some emotional struggles, some stress. Some of us just get some slightly kookier symptoms. Is it a human thing? Or are some of us normal and some of us got brain disease? So, these things make me really think. And that's why I love Ella Longden's TED Talk, and I love the phrase. We shouldn't be asking what's wrong with you, but we need to ask what happened to you. So I've had to, and I still am in some cases, recovering from actually recovering from the biomedical model and the disease model. I'm recovering from services. I'm also recovering from, the diagnosis, the labelling, and the box that I was putting. So we have a one-size-fits-all approach, and you'll get that when you're out in services. There we go. One-size-fits-all approach. Clinical understandings of who I am and side effects of medications. I'm also recovering from society's understandings of who I am as an individual, society's low expectations of me, both personally and professionally, stigma, prejudice, discrimination, and living at the poverty line, financial distress. And this is what many of us are trying to recover from, and it's extremely challenging in today's mental health landscape in WA. So mental health professionals should understand that it's often our low socioeconomic status and all the social determinants of health that is contributing to our sickness. And finally, I'm also recovering from a complete and total loss of hope. And I'd have to say that before I could do lots of recovery-oriented things, I had to find and hold hope for myself, and that's not easy. One has to recover from total and utter hopelessness and despair before anything else, and it's one of the hardest parts of our journey. More on that in question 5. So the next question, what am I recovering towards? And I'm just going to preface this with another quick important point. Recovery is not a linear concept. Recovery is absolutely not a linear process for many of us. And there's this kind of view out there that recovery happens in this straight line, and you start here, this is where you're really sick and everything's bad, you're terribly unwell, and then you move along the line, recovering, and then there's this magical end point at which you've achieved recovery and you're recovered. And I guess a small part of this concept is that, it's ongoing. And I think you all know that. Everyone knows it through life. You're always sort of recovering. It's always an ongoing process and never ends. But the linear thing is still a problem because it's just not that clear cut. And I think recovery for a lot of us is more like a sort of a mishmash of when we come out here and we go back in, and it's naturally messy and untidy, but it's actually still a recovery process. And this linear concept really falls in to what I think are very harmful in mental health, which are these binary concepts. And binaries are really clear cut. The binary is there's your two sides of the chart, the box. On one side, you're unwell, you're sick, you've been diagnosed, you're unemployed, you haven't got nice housing, you've got no friends, there's no money, there's no savings, you're uneducated because your education was interrupted by illness, you've got physical, all this going on, and all that happens there. And on the other side, you've got somebody who's well, a professional, got a career and a car and a house and an income, goes on holidays, educated, yada, 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 yada. That's a binary. And one side is valued by society, and the other side is not valued by society. Now the problem with binaries is that people like me don't fit in. I occupy what's called the liminal space. I'm in betwixt and in between. So I move around. So when I'm working and doing, I have a great career, my own business, all this stuff, and yet sometimes I have patches where I just barely function. But I'm also a mental health professional. And people struggle. When a psychiatrist says, I'm taking a week off because I'm struggling, I've had a debrief, but I'm still not, I'm struggling, and people go, you're a psychiatrist, are you a doctor? Are you a patient? Are you not well? Are you not well? Are you coming back as a doctor? Are you coming as a doctor? Are you not well? And it's people just struggle. And so these liminal spaces are really important. And that's why diagnoses don't really help the social inclusion. Because as people, we love othering. We love to other people because as humans, when we can put someone in a box and give them a label, we're comfortable because it helps us know where we're at. So I'm not like that. I'm like these people. And that's just a natural thing. But I think society needs to start broadening our understanding and support of people that do suffer distress. And so, wow, I'm just really needing to move towards. So, I am recovering towards an internal idea and a concept and a personal truth, not an actual state of being out of hospital and off meds and recovered and in work. It's not really like that. And often some of my greatest achievements and epiphanies and personal growth come when I'm clinically sick. And so this is why I really hate the term relapse. So the term relapse is a Latin derivative word. So re means backwards and lapse means to slip. And I always hear clinicians saying, oh, it's such a shame, he was doing so well and then he relapsed and now he's just right back here. And I'm like, he's not right back there. He's in a completely new situation. He's had a lot of learning up to there and now he's in a new learning opportunity and everything is different and he's actually still moving along on his own path. So I really think we should start trying to avoid this the relapse psychology, that it's a terrible thing. Because when you say to people, it's such a shame you had a relapse because you're doing so well, you're basically telling that person they're a failure. Like you failed, you're in relapse, you're in hospital, this is terrible. It's not terrible, it's part of life and we grow and we learn and we keep going and we build a lot of resilience from it. Like I said, I've had some major moments in my life in a relapse that have helped massively. So it's actually not just normal, but it's a pretty important, necessary part of recovery. And so, yeah, this linear concept and this sort of relapse psychology, I don't think is the most helpful thing that we do. So, I might move, I'm conscious of time. So I'm going to try and move quickly through the next one. What does recovery or my best life look like to me? So look, these are the things, and some of these are totally not unique to me. I mean, we all want this stuff, don't we? This is a normal life. You know, these are all the things that, you know, people who have all these diagnoses are no different to any of us. A lot of us want a career, we want a mortgage, we want all these things. You know, this is life. And we deserve that. Unfortunately, our services don't quite get us to this self-empowering, this self-mastery that I talk about. Because it's only when we get to self-mastery down there that we're essentially driving our own life and we're in control. And we might still have symptoms. We might have decided to come off meds and not be on meds and deal with some of the residual symptoms I don't like, but symptoms that we get, but we can still be in love with our life. Like, I'm coming off meds now and I'm still having some kooky days and it is quite difficult. I might hear some noises, but I want to be off meds long term because they're going to shorten my life by 15 years. They're killing me and they're killing my brain. And yeah, I get some kooky things, but I still love my life. So I don't need the pills to blunt and sedate the hell out of me. Well, I need to sit at home on a pension and find a hobby. Because what we do in our services to a lot of people, and I'm not joking, this actually happened to one of my clients, this is what a care coordinator said, you're a bit old to go for that dream, you know, you need to let go of that now. You've got a pension, you stay at home in pension, and you know, and find a hobby. Geez, that's just not good enough, right? That's not good enough. That's not a life, that's not living, that's just surviving and existing. People deserve more than that, and they deserve to go for their dreams. It doesn't matter if they fail, that's irrelevant. People deserve to try, and they deserve to live. Living is trying is living. And these are all my values, things that I kind of worked out along the way. Those are my top 3 on my core values, and everything else kind of flows from that. All these things, career-oriented things that I strive for all the time. And then you've got these little things I'm into. I love skincare regimes, face packs, mani-pedis, all this stuff that keeps me grounded. Gratitude journaling, it's wonderful. I love writing, you know, travelling, all these things. So, you know, these are all just normal things that a lot of us want. And finally, it's having that is finding beauty in my world. I just use that picture because I love the colours and it went with my PowerPoint. So, yeah. Look, live with passion, live with purpose, okay? So a sense of purpose is probably the thing that you need to find first. And clinicians have this thing, we just get you stable first. You need stability first. well, if I wait for that, it might never happen because life is, I'm going to wax and wane. There's no sense waiting for stability. Give someone some oomph. Give them something to get out of bed in the morning. Give them a sense of purpose, of passion. It doesn't have to be they want to be the next Prime Minister or, Bill Gates. It could be, it could be anything. I want to create an app. I want to be a better dad. I want to do creative writing. I can't cook, actually really need to learn to cook, but I'm thinking I might be a really great chef. Any harebrained kind of, it could be anything. But just something that gives you some oomph. And that's really, really important. And you don't have to wait for stability because the stability comes when you find all of these things. That's when the stability comes. And so I think we have it a little bit backwards sometimes. So what supports and interventions have I found helpful? Firstly, my unbelievably, incredibly supportive family, my husband, have just been a godsend, and I wouldn't be where I am now without them. And I'm very fortunate to have that because a lot of people that you might be working with are quite isolated. They don't have family here, and they've lost a lot of friends along the way, and that's what happens to us because we're too difficult for people. We're high maintenance, so we lose a lot of friends. So I'm very lucky to have had that. That's probably not a particularly helpful answer because you all. Everybody knows that humans need humans. We need connections and family and support, and mental health professionals obviously know a lot about that. I found that keeping a journal of all my innermost thoughts and feelings and ideas was incredibly helpful. Sometimes I might just start what I think is going to be a regular entry. Aware of. You should try it, so it's very interesting if you don't. And then I can see my feelings because they're there in black and white, like I've written them and I can't unwrite them. So it makes that intangible into the decipherable. And I thought, whoa, there it is. Very powerful, very cathartic, and also very helpful because sometimes when you go to a psychiatrist, it's sometimes helpful to make notes because often I've left going, oh, I didn't ask about the... and then journals are great because your psychiatrist can see what is she saying, what is she doing, what is she feeling. So very helpful. And number 5, how important is hope to me and how have mental health professionals held hope for me? And as support workers, you guys, this is going to be your sort of core business. Is a lot of people you're going to meet are hopeless and they don't, and they really can't find it, and they're not going to believe you when you say everything's going to be okay. And that's the thing that you should say. That's a humane response. It's crap, and I know you can't see anything right now and you can't see the hope, but it will be okay. Just let me hold the hope for you. I'm happy to hold the hope because it will happen. That is a nice, simple, humane response, but it's really important that you say to them, I will hold the hope for you. And for some reason that it really clicks with us. We like that. There's lots of YouTube videos on holding hope. And so hope is so integral to our recovery process. Like I said earlier, we can't really start unless we find some hope or we believe that someone's holding the hope for us and we trust them, that it's true, there's hope there. And one time I was in an MDT, a multidisciplinary team meeting, and I heard the clinician, it was early on the first year of peer support, and I heard the clinician discussing their case, another word I hate, discussing their person. No family, no friends, isolated, and she'd been in service 17 years, no real results. Well, she's relatively stable, it's like we'll just discharge, and she's irrecoverable, but she's stable at the minute, so we'll discharge and then we'll take her back when she comes back, because she'll come back, she's irrecoverable. And I went, wow, you just talked about how she doesn't have anyone, and you're the one person that she has to hold hope, and you're freaking paid. It's actually your job to hold hope. And you come out with a statement like that, it's no wonder that she's not feeling it from you. Like, if she was a fly on the wall right now, that would be me. Wow, there's actually not even a professional that thinks I can do this. And that happens to so many of us. And I thought that was a pretty sick thing to say because we're actually all recoverable with the right circumstances. And I did say to this clinician, the fact that she's been with you with the service for 17 years is probably more a reflection of our failure to help her than a personal flaw that she's irrecoverable. So, I do make some waves sometimes at work, but you have to because we need to move things along. And so, the other part of that question, How have... Look, I'm probably going to stick with that answer because I can give you some relatively generic, this is how professionals hope for me. I'm sure you can read lots of case studies. I'm sure as humans you can think of all those stories. But I wanted to say the negative one, not because I'm a negative person, but because that was a really powerful moment for me. It was actually one of my first team meetings, and I just came out, wow, I'm working in a really clinical environment. It really drove home biting the steering wheel. So please, when you go out in your professional mental health support jobs, you can be a change agent. I mean, you can't go around just breaking all the rules, and if you rub up a lot of psychiatrists and doctors the wrong way, they won't give you any referrals to work with anyone. But you can chip away and say little things like, I really prefer the phrase, duh, or I prefer the phrase, duh. You know, just chip those little things in there, because that's what peer workers do, that's part of our job. And what have I found most helpful, and what's hindered my recovery? To be honest, there wasn't one single thing that was the most beneficial, helpful thing. It was a whole load of things. And it requires that sort of holistic approach. Not everything works for everyone, and we all kind of have our own recipe. And I guess as support workers, your job is to, create a menu. You can create your own menu. We do a lot of templated forms in mental health, and if you ever can avoid doing it that way, write your own. It's just, be a bit creative. As far as, this sounds really bad because I'm focusing on another negative, but this is good. What hindered my recovery was the lack of information that I was given, or pointed to, or directed to. So the amount of services that are available, NGO sector, government sector, private sector, there's lots of things out there, but the dissemination of information is quite bad. I mean, care coordinators, when I say care coordinators, I mean case managers. It's just that I refuse to call people case managers. I don't think people like being referred to as a case generally, because it has that connotation of sad case, hopeless case. And managers a bit, while you're clearly doing a terrible job of your life, so I need to manage you. I'm going to be your manager, and I'm going to manage you. You're my case, and I'm now managing you. So language can be empowering or disempowering, and if you really start looking very, very carefully at all the language you use in our system, despite the fact that we say we're in recovery-focused language now, we're not really, because some of the language they're still using, they think is recovery-focused. If you really look at it, and you look at the history and the context and the meaning and the level of empowerment, a lot of it's empowering. Case manager, make no mistake, it's a very disempowering term. I didn't even know that peer support was a thing. And I'd done probably 7.5 years with my psychiatrist then, and I did private as well, but I really should have known, because I would have loved to have had a peer worker, but I didn't. And number 7, is it 7? Oh yes, this is the environment that you might find yourself getting stuck in. The best experience that I've had with a mental health professional, I think this is 7, yeah. What is the best experience that I've had with a mental health professional? And this is a tiny story, and it probably won't sound like much to you, but it was incredible for me. I found myself pregnant, which was a real shock, because I was supposed to be infertile, but also I actually didn't want children. It wasn't in my life plan. So I was pretty angry. And I know that just sounds really humane. Oh my God, I want to have babies, but I really didn't. I didn't. Anyway, it happened, and I thought maybe it's a sign, because it wasn't supposed to happen, and my husband wanted it, but I knew he really wanted a baby, so off we went. So I found out on a Saturday morning, and my GP said, we don't know how far, or all I know is that you're pregnant. All the meds you're on are toxic. This is bad. You have got to get off these meds quickly. And I'm not, I can't take you off. I'm a GP. I don't know how to. You need to go to the emergency department now and see a psych and get a plan, because you've got to get a plan. Oh, I was panicky, scary. Oh my God. Turned up at the ED, and I was in triage, and the triage nurse taking my details, name, blah blah blah. I got diagnosed. She goes, "Oh, you diagnosed schizoaffective disorder." Yes. and having a chat, and then he goes, okay, so diagnosis schizoaffective disorder, and do you agree with the diagnosis, Phoebe? How do you feel about that? I've just stepped into like a completely different universe, because it hit me that in, what was it, would have been by that point, in 9 years, no one ever asked me. They never asked me what my opinion was. They never asked me if I agreed with that. You just get slapped with the label and you're supposed to accept it, and if you question it, you lack insight, you know, you're terrible, you don't, you know, it's, and I looked at him and went, well, I pretty much disagree with it now because I've done a lot of learning, but I know it's like, it's in my medical files, and you know, I always have to say this is the diagnosis because I'm on medication and you need to know what I'm taking because I'm on meds at the moment. But I just thought, wow, it's so simple and it was so nice, and it literally lit up my world. And I came out to my husband and I was like, I just got asked how I felt about diagnosis because like my opinion matters, you know? And it was just wonderful, and I did, and I put a little compliment in the box saying, this guy is just, wow, it's made me feel great. So anyway, enough about that, but yeah, that was really powerful for me. It doesn't sound like much to you, but it was really powerful for me, because imagine being in services for 9 years and no one ever asked you what you thought about it. And we just generally don't. I've heard clinicians on the phone every day, I'm your new case manager, we'll come in and meet, and I never hear any real discussion around what that person's understanding of their experience is. So yeah, amazing. And my next question. Oh, okay. So look, this is slightly, I don't know what jobs you're all going to go into, but I'm presuming you will be in mental health and in support work and using your diploma for these things. So I guess pick what works for you here. Now, if you're involved, I guess I could explain it in a slightly quicker way. Yeah, look, it depends if you're working in a, because in my job I'm in a community clinic, so I can go out to people's houses, or I meet them in the cafe, or take them to the library, so I'm not quite sure what all your circumstances will be, but try and spend time together differently, you know. You don't just want to go to coffee shop, you don't want to just sit in a clinic in those rooms, because those rooms are just so clinical. So, yeah, get a bit creative, and some people say, oh, you know, I'm gained weight on the meds, I wouldn't mind losing a bit, then just say to them, well, in our appointment, in our support appointments, we could do an hour's walk, you know, you can walk and talk. There's all things you can do to make what you do for someone that little bit different and a bit more creative. And care plans, because you might be supporting someone with their care coordinator, making their care plan, or advocating with them. And yeah, look, try to make sure that the person's own language is being used. They get to choose their own language, because like I said earlier, we have these templates. This is gorgeous black and white PDFs called management plans in government services. And everyone gets the same one. And I've probably read maybe a couple hundred, and I've not seen one that's different from it. It's just the same phrases like support social connectivity, help with assisted daily living activities, decrease social anxiety. And I just think, oh God, it's so uninspiring. It's like, I don't know, that PDF's like, yeah. So if you're involved in care, you know, you can always suggest to the person that they've got to do this one, but you and I can do a scrapbook, and you can pick out the pictures that inspire you, find some quotes, we'll get some glitter pen. Men might not want to do that because I'm not. But you know, there are a lot of creative guys though that have diagnoses. People are often very, very creative after mental and emotional distress. So, but yeah, I did mention glitter to a couple of guys, and it's like, no, we'll just do highlighters. So, but choose whatever you want. Yeah, choose whatever you want, and just do something creative. Because my idea is that I would love it if people were coming into services, doing an actual scrapbook, choosing their own language. They write the care plan, they do the pictures, and then the clinician signs it. They might have to add some legal, you know, there's things they have to do. And the person walks out going, my care plan, I made this, I'm so inspired, I'm going to recover. I'm going to do all the stuff that I put in here. Why can't we just do that? Why can't we offer that? break any rules. So yeah, look, just try and be creative when you're supporting people. Just think outside the box, I guess. And power sharing. This was probably more for clinicians, but I suppose it does probably apply to you too, because you're going to be mental health professionals, and so people will still feel a little bit of that power imbalance. I mean, you're there with your ID badge on, and you've got the keys, and you've got a separate toilet, and it's like that imbalance is a really big thing for us, and we can feel it a lot. I refuse to wear my ID badge when I see my clients. I'm their peer. I'm their peer. And yes, I'm working in services offering support, but I try to de-professionalise my look as much as possible. We're nearly 22, it's good. Oh, yeah, this PowerPoint, like I said, is adapted from another lecture, so there was a section there, but yeah, you'll see that a lot as well. It's really inspiring, don't you think? When you come in, you get your diagnosis, and there he is. You need to do this, sort your life out. Yeah. So I'm being facetious. The clinic I work at have incredible clinicians, and I would say probably that all the clinicians I work with, and a lot of psychiatrists are beautiful people, and they are passionate. And they really do want to help. But people pop out of university after their 4-year clinical degree, and they're trained into something that they can't get out of, and they work in a service where they're forced to do a lot of these risk assessment, all these things they have to do, and they have to take on massive volume of people to support, and so there is and a lot of them are as frustrated as me and make the same jokes as me, like, why can't we just do this? Well, I don't want to do a risk assessment because it's not worth the paper it's written on, and so yes, I don't want to sound this whole lecture like I bash professionals and everything we do, because there are wonderful things being done in WA and initiatives, and we're wonderful clinicians. I love my psychiatrists. I'm generally an anti-biological psychiatry I'm against. But yeah, so don't please take me as a consistent basher. We're coming towards the end. Based on my experience, what suggestions do I have around how a person's safety and dignity can be supported by mental health professionals during times of crisis? So this is a really good one. And I love this question. And it could be an entire presentation in itself, so I'm going to try and move quite quickly. And I've just tried to focus on just a few important points I think it'll be easier for you to remember. Firstly, when it comes to crisis plans, and you may be involved in helping someone figure their crisis plans, ensure that when you're all talking, that you are all on the same page. It's really good practice to start asking a lot of clarifying questions to seek a clear and more detailed understanding about people's wishes during times of crisis, what they want and what they don't want. Any miscommunications can be disastrous. Ideally, the crisis plan, this is what I was talking about earlier, just genuinely co-created with you and thinking outside the box and all these things. Oh, hang on, that's the next, sorry. And some ideas of things to ask about. So when someone says, oh, I want to go to hospital, I don't want to go to Royal Perth, I've had that experience, I'm not going to Royal Perth. And you go, oh, okay. If you can ask a few more questions around that, not just, okay, in the plan, tick box, hospital, yes, but not Royal Perth Cross. If you just do that, that's probably, or it might not be enough, because if you ask questions like, well, why is it that you don't want to go to Royal Perth? Was it a situation that happened? Or is there a member of staff there? Does your friend work there? If you uncover all these things, and you know the reason why somebody doesn't want something, wants something, then in that time of crisis, if you've got the reasoning, you'll be better enabled to make a suitable alternative. Because if you've only got not Royal Perth somewhere else, and Royal Perth is the only one, is it a specific ward, or could we go, ask what are the reasons underneath you not wanting this and wanting that, because in that time of crisis, if you have that reasoning, you can go, but she didn't want to go there because of this, or that one, but we know that she's been here before because this is in the, so yeah, I guess skate around, move around everything. Now, this is so silly, but it's actually, this happens a lot. Discuss their pets. One, a lot of us who have all these mental emotional challenges, we love our pets, and we might be living on our own, and our pet is our only thing. So it's like our fur baby, basically. And ask what are the decisions around that pet, because you can empower people by, I don't like what I just said, it sometimes slips out. I don't actually believe anyone in mental health can empower someone else. The only real form of empowerment is self-empowerment, but again, it's another lecture. But you can support people to self-empower by giving them a lot of time to actually make decisions in times of crisis. It's not usually a minute-to-minute, oh my God, we've got to get to the hospital in 15 minutes. And we're 12 minutes away, so we've got to go right now. You know, there's lots of things that you can do that can really help support a person in these absolute sort of crisis times. Now, before I go to that slide, I just need to make sure. Yes, I think we're going to go on to the dignity, because I had a few points around dignity that I think are actually as important as safety. And I'm going to yarn on to you about safety because you're going to be mental health professionals, you're learning all that anyway, and you're going to be in a job and you have all these legal obligations and you're going to do your OH&S or OS&H, whatever it is. And, you know, it's a bit patronising me standing here going, oh, safety's this, safety's that. You know, it's, and anything that's not in policies or in your diploma you have to learn is probably common sense. And so, look, let's move on to the dignity. And I always want, you know, the first one's really probably relevant to clinicians because they've got that power to form people and sort of lock them up. But try and always ensure that when you're involved in any of this, that the clinician really is using best practice of the least restrictive approach. It really should be a last resort putting someone on a locked ward. It is incredibly traumatic for the individual, and all the research and statistics show that it actually lengthens their stay, it increases their trauma, it causes further problems, and they keep returning to services. What we do doesn't work, and not to mention that locking people in a hospital ward is actually illegal. Okay? Incarcerating someone in a hospital for a mental health reason is actually legal under international law. Okay? Australia is a signatory to the UN Convention on Rights and Responsibilities of People with Disabilities. And it clearly states that no person may ever be incarcerated based on any health status. We signed this law and we break it every single day. So make no mistake, what we do here is not actually legal. In the UN and the international law, it's illegal. And I'm hoping that one day Australia will be made to answer, and that the UN is actually going to actually start enforcing their laws here, and other countries like us that do the same thing, and that will force us into the kind of policy reform that I speak about and that I talk about people and what a lot of us want. There are other countries that have gone beyond this and getting much better results than what we get. So what we do doesn't work. However, you might be in situations where someone you're working with has been put in hospital and you're going to have to do your best empathy and, very, very traumatising. I often ask clinicians to avoid using police escorts wherever possible, and the police now are actually moving away. They're telling us a lot of the time now that they're not coming. They're really trying to disconnect from this. But that's very traumatising, having guards and police take you to hospital. And to be honest, if clinicians and everybody is well trained in their de-escalation and their least restrictive practices, it actually shouldn't be that necessary. It's possible to do things without doing all this, but it does happen. And if you're talking with someone, whether in your clinic, organisation or in their home, and that they've been told they've been taken to hospital now, or that an ambulance has been called or it's happening, really hold some time and space, and that means if someone came into my house, and yes, I may be feeling very, very distressed, and they say, we have to go now, just grab your jammies and come. That's just not a nice one. It's so stressful. And for someone like me, and for lots of people, we kind of don't want to turn up to a hospital, especially a psychiatric hospital, looking our worst. You know, you've got like sauce in your hair, you've still got your slippers on, and you just barged out the door and you turn up to face looking the worst. You don't even get to present your best. You know, that sounds really superficial. You might think that's because I'm a woman and I like dressing up, but it actually is a very, it's very undignified turning up sometimes when you're looking as bad as you feel, maybe emotionally. And so just give someone some, would you like to pack some clothes? Did you want to brush your hair? Have you brushed your teeth? Did you want to brush your teeth? Can I help choose some shoes? What would you like to wear? And you know, just be humane. Say, we haven't got much choice, we're being forced, we're going to hospital. Let's do it in a way that gives you some form of control over what's happening to you. Yeah, so please help someone present themselves in a way that means something to them. Because clinicians often just form someone and then a week later they've forgotten about it. But for that person who was rushed to hospital in their pyjamas, looking bad, and is now locked up, that stays forever. Like that level of being incarcerated, honestly, is a level of trauma that it's, yeah. So try and at least do all these things. If this is happening, try and do all these things. I always remove my ID badge when I go out. It's, you know, you're walking down someone's driveway with your ID. It's clear that you're a health worker. And some people's neighbours, you're going to meet people that do say to you, they'll actually say point blank when they first meet you, take your ID badge off before you walk down my road, every week. Especially in Mount Claremont. I tell you a story about Mount Claremont, so that's not good. And supporting a client's self-agency and self-responsibility, and I had a little example. Well, I mentioned pets earlier, and I was going to do this bit then, but I was trying to, because I'm editing in my head as I go along, by the way. If you rush in and go, right, I'll just take your dog to the neighbour, I'm taking your dog to the neighbour, or if you just rush in and start doing things and pulling it all together, you feel like being really helpful. I get the dog sorted quick, find one, take the dog, here's your clothes, I hope you pack a bag, it doesn't matter what you're wearing, just shove your jeans in. It's very, very stressful, and there's no dignity. And the part about self-agency and self-responsibility is just allowing that person to actually make some decisions and act on those decisions themselves. So a nice example would be like, now, we've got some pre-written plans about your pet, or maybe not. Now, where's your diary with your numbers? Or where's your phone with your numbers? Now, you must decide now who's going to take your dog, and I'll just sit here quietly and you can have a conversation about your dog. You need to find, you need to make your arrangements. You need to make your arrangements for your dog. That's not your job to do that, that's their job. Yes, they're unwell, but giving them a bit of self-responsibility actually gives a sense of control. So you're actually helping them feel a little bit more positive about being rushed to a hospital or to a clinic or anywhere. You know, just say to them, you need to take care of your business. I'll help you. Have you got your glasses? You want me to find the number? But you have to call them and you have to sort your dog out. You know, it does help. It sounds really harsh, but it's called to be kind. And it actually does help us. Now, I think we're near the end. There's the next one. Oh, this is the last one. Yeah. Wow, I'm actually on time, and that's quite amazing because I was just editing in my head and then I was still digressing off on all my little passionate points. So I've done quite well, but yeah, look, the harm minimisation approach can actually be harmful. So we have a harm minimisation approach in government and statutory services. NGOs, a bit different. I'm talking about in government services, mental health services. Yeah, look, I could do a whole lecture on this as well, but people just have to be allowed to make mistakes. It's, you know, as professionals, like, you get allowed to make a mistake. You do something, get stressed out and take 2 days mental health days off work, or you stuff up your finances, make a mistake, and then you feel crap and go out and drink for 2 nights. Like, you're allowed to, so I'm allowed to as well. Because I'm a human being as well, and I can make mistakes, and I should be allowed to make mistakes with no judgment like, oh, it's because she's got my. No, it's because she's made a mistake. And yes, sometimes the mania does, you know, it's weird because I'm against a lot of sort of symptom phrases and terms, but I actually quite like the word mania, because for me, when I'm having it kind of does sound like it, you know, manic sounds like I am. And yes, that probably is responsible for some of my bad decisions, but there are other decisions that are just me. It's just Phoebe making a mistake, like I just invested in the wrong thing, or I booked holiday in the wrong time and had to rebook, you know, and then I get stressed, but that's just life. And so this risk-averse approach is actually risky, because you risk someone not fulfilling their potential and having the feeling of actually living and trying and being alive by wrapping them up in cotton wool and being their crutch. You know, if you crutch someone along and you've got all the padding everywhere, this is sort of hypothetically, not like physically, don't actually wrap someone up. But if you do that and you don't allow them to fall over, and you don't allow anything to happen because it'll be bad and they'll get really upset and it'll be terrible and they'll relapse and we've all failed. If you keep doing that, then it's not real, and it's not authentic, and it certainly isn't living. That's not living. That's just surviving along in this little fake world where everyone pussyfoots around you so that you don't, hurt yourself mentally. It's not authentic. It's not real. You know, if someone said, I want to do, I don't know, let's pick a really silly example. I want to climb Mount Everest. And your basic clinical response is, I think it's a bit risky because you might relapse. I think we need to just adjust our expectations and come up with a compromise where maybe you can go and walk around Kings Park once a week. Because it's risky. Well, gee. Just quit now, shall I? And just not do anything risky. You know, there's such a thing called positive risk. There's positive risk that actually has a really great result and actually helps someone. And as mental health professionals, we always need to focus on the dignity of risk. Giving people dignity allows them to make their own decision. It might stuff up, we might all be worried about it, but if we're all there in support anyway, we're all collaborating, we're all in it together, then it shouldn't really matter. And if I keep trying to do something that they think is, never going to happen because it's not, maybe not achievable. If I keep doing it enough times and I keep failing, I'll probably come to that conclusion myself, like, wow, I'm probably actually not fit enough to climb Mount Everest because I'm mathematics, that was already done with you. But the enjoyment of trying is beautiful. It's living, just let people, your job is not to make hard decisions and just keep us safe no matter what. Your job is to help us live our best life the way we want to. It's our decision. We deserve the dignity of risk. It's not for you to say what our goals should be. You support us, but you support us to do it in the safest way. Because you've got some good knowledge, you've got theoretical knowledge, you've got your skill set, you're a professional. Say, okay, I'm not sure you're going to, this could take a long time, this dream, but I'm with you. Let's do it, but can we do it like this so that we've got some self-management, some strategies along the way to help? I'm with you, but can we all collaborate and all use our knowledge set? You're the best, you've got the best knowledge in you. No one knows you more than you. You're yours and you aim for this goal, and I'll use all the stuff that we use in services to help enable you to do that. So that's our job. And lastly, so giving here it is. And I think it's 10 o'clock, so I'm just going to wrap up there. But yeah, I guess my message to any kind of mental health support workers is just open your mind that people might have other ideas about what their experiences mean, and they're allowed that, and that's legitimate because there's no science anywhere else. So if people say, oh no, it's actually part of my culture, but more for me it's a spiritual thing, just go with that. That's their choice, they're entitled to that, and just amend your language to language that they like. And even though in your job you probably have to do certain things, there's paperwork just to have to do. And you might look at it and go, wow, that's really disempowering paperwork. There's some rules you can't break, you're just going to have to do it. But if you can always, when you're with that person, stretch your mind around to where they're at and what they think, and just, agree and go, hey, that's a legitimate reasoning for your problems. You could put in, do you think it might be this or that, or have these conversations, but don't just force. I struggle when people just force a diagnosis on someone like, this is you. You've done that because you've got bipolar. Just try and avoid, meet people where they're at, and I guess that's my main message. And so, thank you very much for listening. And I think if any of you want to see any of my some of the videos are not uploaded yet, they're in editing, but there is a few videos on my website, and there's a YouTube channel, Through the Rabbit Hole.